Hey, all, Andy here, helping you build a career you love. If you're here with me live, we're in part 2, job interviewing with the CAAR technique. We're going to have a little session right now on the CAAR technique in relation to the STAR technique and really kind of the differences, the nuances, how to compare and contrast these two. It's going to be a great show. Now, I'm going to assume, because this is a double feature, that you've already seen the first part of this double header, which is called the job interview. Let me make sure I get the title right. The job interview formula, guaranteed to get you hired. If you're watching this on a recording where you're not with me live, I will make sure that there is a link in the card. I think it's up there, so you could watch that first. So I'm gonna talk a little bit more about what the storytelling formula is that I like. That's basically my vernacular for how do you answer questions in a job interview. Now, we just got done talking about what it is you're really trying to do when you're responding to somebody in a job interview. When they ask you a question and you're answering something, where a lot of people, the big mistake that job seekers make is you're trying to speculate what questions are going to be asked and then what your best response would be to highlight the skills that you have in relation to the job description. And it's all very backwards and bad and not nearly as potent as recognizing and anticipating what the employer's goals and problems are, and then figuring out from your standpoint, what is the experience that I have that I need to share with them in the interview in relation to the questions they ask me, but what is it I want to tell them? Doesn't matter what questions they ask me, I know what I'm going to tell them because I know what they need to know in order to know whether I can help them achieve their goals by overcoming their problems. A lot of that can be done from the desk. And when you do that, you're going to be on offense and you're going to make sure that you're sharing the right kind of stuff in the right way. Remember, employers are buyers, and everybody, you're a customer of some things, products, and services. You do not buy features and you do not buy skills. You buy transformation. You buy outcomes that you anticipate or expect or hope to achieve as a result of buying a product or buying a service, enlisting a coach, hiring an employee, whatever it is. Employers are no different. Now, like I said, I'm going to assume that you have a base understanding of what this technique is, but any question that you get asked can be answered this way. I'm going to run through some slides, and then I want to do some comparing and contrasting into what this does in relation to the CAAR technique. So this storytelling formula is what I just shared in part 1 of this double feature. The CAAR technique, it's really kind of 2 A's in the middle. The first piece, when you respond and you're going to tell a story, irrespective of what the question is you want to give them context, color about why you were doing what you were doing. This serves as a primer to move the listener's emotional state to the place you want it, which is thinking you are a total badass. Right? Knows her stuff is important. They called her in because she's the fixer, or she knows how to handle the ambiguous issue that this is, or we're not quite sure what to do. They called in somebody with experience, something like that. Yes, you're building up a little drama, but you're really trying to highlight what were the goals or what were the problems that you were dealing with. The next thing that you want to roll through is what I call the first part of the approach. This is really the methodology, or you might hear me call it the framework, the playbook, the steps, but all of the steps all in order and all in aggregate, all together. That is a grouping that you're going to explain. What this does, to refresh your memory from the first part, is it helps give the listener an outline of what you are about to tell them. It gives them a map of the discussion. So you're not going to explain your activities and your steps and the things that you did and investigated and implemented and all. You're going to tell them, I did this, and this, just to let them know. Here's what's coming. Then you're actually going to walk them through. So the third part, which is the second part of the approach, is really more about here's the actions I took within the steps I just highlighted for you. And then you're gonna recap it or bookend it with the result. Now, if you've done the context portion of the explanation correctly, you've actually foreshadowed at a minimum a low level of the result that you've achieved. And if you recall back to the example I just gave you in the previous session, where you're highlighting the things that you're trying to achieve, or the things that were broken, or the despair you were in, or whatever it was, the listener is going to assume that you're mentioning that because you're telling them what you actually achieved. They're going to make that natural inference. So this is just a recap of what each of the stages is. And here again, I wanted to go through that quickly because I'm going to assume that you just watched the 42-minute previous session where I went into nauseating detail about this. Now what I'd like to do is I want to actually take you through a more detailed view at what the context is and what the benefits of setting it up the way that I'm describing it, as well as how it might be similar or unlike the STAR technique, and I'll explain what the STAR technique is as well. All right, so the first thing is I want to look at this for each of the different stages of the CAAR technique. So when we're talking about the context, we're talking about why the story matters. If you get asked a question in an interview and you just start talking, the first thing I did was, the second thing I did was, number one, you didn't give them any literal context. They don't know why this story was important. They don't know what you were trying to achieve. They don't know why you were chosen. There's just a lot of things they don't know. And remember, back to the first part, we're trying to elicit feelings that we want them to have, because they're going to hire you based on how they feel about you. The interview is about saying things to them that are planting the right feelings that you want them to have. So you want to make sure that you're giving them insight into why this matters. Were you losing customers? We had a customer service system and a department, but we seem to have a twice double the industry average of losing customers every year. Our retention rate was only 50% or 70% when it should have been 90%, or it should have been 20%, or whatever it was. That translates into losing 500,000 customers a year. It's very, very difficult for us because it's much easier to sell to an existing customer and treat an existing customer. So just give me some kind of idea. Why is this important? Even if you were the IT project manager enlisted to build a new system. So instead of saying, well, the situation was I'm an IT project manager and I was asked to implement a CRM system. That's how a lot of people explain that kind of stuff. So what were the goals and the problems? We're talking about what the business goals and business problems were. We wanted to implement a new system so that we can streamline the calls, reduce the amount of, number one, make sure that everybody could answer the questions more quickly, to free up time to potentially discuss new features, opportunities, things we could upsell, better serve, or whatever it might be. But you want to give them some very, very specific insight into what those goals or problems were, and it can be done very, very quickly. What this does is it primes the result and it moves their emotional state to the place you want it. I'm using the word prime because it's actually technically a textbook psychological term. When you prime something, anything, when I prime a speech, when I prime a show, when I prime an email, you want to move the person, the audiences, or the person you're communicating with. You want to move their emotional state to the place you want it, right? I'm excited to announce. They know something good is coming, that kind of stuff. So if you prime your responses correctly, I'm not to exaggerate for effect, if you prime them correctly, if the rest of the answer is gobbledygook, it almost doesn't matter as much because they anchor on their first feeling. And if their first feeling is, I'm not sure where this is going, then you have to dig yourself out of a hole. You've primed poorly. So you might think, well, I'm just explaining it in an orderly fashion. Yeah, but I don't know where this story's going. I don't know where you are. I don't know about how long it's going to take. I don't know if we're on step 3 or step 30 or how many of these we need to go through. I don't know how if I have to hang on to all the information. People do this in friendly conversations and they really do it badly in interviews. So you want to make sure that you're priming, and it also gives you a chance to insert at a minimum result in the beginning. Remember, repetition is helpful because you're going to give them the result at the end and recap it, but it's nice to hit them twice with it. Get them excited up front. This also captures and keeps their attention, a la the interview intervention methodology as well. This also gives you a chance to, oh goodness, I hate when this happens. Hang on. I want to get this back up. I don't know why it does that. It gives you a chance to give them context above yourself. Why is this important? How many of you ask me, Andy, how can I sound more senior? Andy, how can I get a higher level position? Well, one of the first things you're going to need to do is you're going to need to elevate what you're talking about and why it's important. I've given this example a few times in the past couple of years, but I was working with a woman who was being hired to kind of be the enterprise PMO person, kind of the senior ranking person right below the CIO for all the programs in this capital markets financial services company. There were like 200 different projects going on that she was going to need to manage, and she'd never held a position this high. And so when I was prepping her for an interview, I said to her, okay, how would you explain? They're going to ask you how you've built PMO programs before. How? I always ask because I want to know what raw material I'm working with when I'm coaching somebody. I said, how would you explain that to me? And she started walking me through, well, the first thing I would do is I would get a list of the projects and this and that, right? So that's very low level, very prescriptive, and very tactical. But instead, if you want to elevate your level of discussion, even though they're asking her about a futuristic question and not something historical, she'd say, well, one of the first things you need to do, so from a contextual standpoint, is understand what the corporate strategy is, what the primary drivers are, what projects are going to give us the most ROI and accelerated return on cash flow and accelerated payback periods in relation to the goals we want to accomplish, and so on and so forth. So you elevate the discussion. You go one step above you. She's not going to work on the corporate strategy, or she's not going to prioritize the projects from that standpoint, from a goals standpoint. What she's going to do is she's going to identify the projects that it's going to take in order to help achieve those goals. But the scope and some of the boundaries are going to be set for her. Well, that doesn't mean she can't talk about how to get off on the right foot by recognizing that this step needs to come first. You don't just start assembling projects just because you have them on the docket. That's what I'm talking about when it gives you a chance to elevate it. If you're talking about something that happened, right? The woman who's in the example that I just gave with the flapjacks in part 1, she didn't set the direction. She was handed an objective because they knew that there was market share to be gained there. She wasn't the one who came to them and said, hey, I think you need to give me $200,000 so that I can run a project so that we can gain market share for people under 50. No, she was handed that objective. But the discussion starts up there. That's part of the context. It elevates you. It elevates the discussion. Then the other thing is you are at the center of everything that you do. You have to be. So a lot of you ask me along the way, well, Andy, I did this and I was part of a team. I even mentioned in the flapjacks example when she said, well, I didn't do all of this work. It doesn't matter. You're telling a story from your viewpoint. So what you're doing is you're talking around yourself. I was handed this. We did this, and then here's what I did with it, even though I didn't develop it. That's what I'm talking about. So when you're setting up the context, you can also give color as to where you are in the picture. Why were you selected? I was, and they chose me because I'm the resident expert on, because I have done this 17 times. You with me? Part of the context, right? It's not. In the STAR technique, that's not usually the situation, but this is part of the context in the Andy CAAR technique. So why is this important? All of this not only primes the story the way you want it primed, but they are immediately going to start thinking, wow, you're important. That sounds dire, or that sounds like a really hard task. We needed to break in because we knew there was oil on the coast of Africa and we didn't have anything there, right? Like the other example I gave you. Elevate your position. The other thing it does, these are the feelings, and I know I talked about this in part 1, but I wanted to lay this down for you here. It shows that you're going to have an impact. It in many cases, you have to realize you've only given them context. What happens the moment you give somebody context? Their imagination runs wild. So they start thinking, wow, that sounds complicated. You must have been able to overcome. You must really know what you're doing. You must have a track record of reliability that they turn this over to you. Are these not plausible assumptions when you set the table for yourself? Who's following me on this? Give me an I'm tracking in the chat, because this is really important. This is the part that most people either skip entirely or totally screw up. This is the part you're going to need to practice the most, even though you're going to say it so fast. Because number one, you need to remember to say it. And number two, you need to say it in as few words as possible. 10, 20 seconds tops. Cool? All right, what's the other thing? From a communication standpoint, it will capture their attention, and it will move their emotional state to where you want. And for those of you, I know I'm little right now in the slide, but if you don't have the Interview Intervention $7 book package, where I will ship this to you anywhere in the world for $7 US, you get the ebook, the audiobook, and this $30 hardbound. I'll send it to you anywhere. If you want, you can learn more about this. Now, to put this in relation to the STAR, and you heard me probably in the earlier package say, I don't necessarily have an issue with the situational aspect of the STAR technique, because my CAAR technique and the context is somewhat analogous, except the insides, or really what the details are that you should be including in the context, are often very difficult. Because a lot of people say, well, the situation was my boss asked me to investigate an innovative way to roll out flapjacks. That's a situation. It's also what you were tasked to do. But that's what a lot of people do. And they isolate it to the level that they're currently on, which I don't ever want you to do. I always want your first step in a response to be a step up. Get that right there? You know what? Write that down. First step, up, goes up. What's the first thing I could tell them that's above me? Because you got handed something. Wait, even if you took initiative and you did it out of thin air, it was still because of something that was coming down, right? Y'all get that? Your first step should be up, not sideways. So in the STAR technique, a lot of people they want to just tell them a simple diminutive thing. And I don't want you to think that way. And I also want to say this, so I don't have to say this over and over again. I don't really care what you call the steps. You could call this anything you want. This is what I want you to put in there. The stuff on the left column. Call it whatever you want. All right? And I think you really lose the opportunity to capture their attention. And remember something. You know, I talked a lot about this in part one, where I says you are shooting for feelings, not details, right? You want them to feel something. When you prime anything this way, it makes them listen differently. And I want you to think in terms of, if I get this step correctly, I will change how they listen to me. Because they will start making automatic assumptions that everything that you're about to say is brilliant. Why? Because you already told me the problem you solved. It looked like must have been a Herculean effort, and I'm just going to assume that you know what you're doing. Instead of not giving them that detail, not letting them make those inferences, right? And I talked about this in Interview Intervention, right? You want to get the benefit of the doubt, not the detriment of the doubt. If you miss this step, you're not going to get that, okay? That's the context. Now, let's talk about the approach. This is the system. Everything you've done in your life is a system. You've never done one thing where it did not require multiple steps. Unless somebody slid a piece of paper across your desk and your only job was to take a stamp and go, boom, you've done more than one thing. And so I want you to explain, there were a series of steps. I have a framework for this. I have a methodology. I have a 7-step approach. I have a 3-step approach. I have a 2-step approach. I don't care how many steps it is. Give them a number and tell them what's coming. You reverse engineer everything you did. I know we chuckled about the Andy closet story, but I have 5 steps to organize the closet. Everybody has 5 steps. It doesn't matter how many clothes you have, whether you have 3 t-shirts like I do or 3,000 of whatever my wife has in her closet. It's the same series of steps. It goes in a pile. I inventory everything. I have some organization to put them in groups. The shirts go together. Maybe the colored shirts go together. Maybe the striped shirts go together. Then I have priorities and criteria based on the weather. It's spring. Spring stuff goes first. Then I put it back. Then I put it in there. Then I double check it to make sure a shirt isn't out of place. That's a system. You didn't just organize the closet, right? You with me? Who's with me? Everything you do is hard. Or at least you could make it sound eloquent. All right, so reverse engineer, you lay out all the steps together. And by this, I mean, you say them all at once. You don't explain them. Oh, well, when I organize my closet like I organize everything else. There's an inventory, right? There's an assembly. There's priorities. Then I implement according to the priorities, and then I double check it. That's it. You're going to lay them all out. Just like I gave you that 7-step example with the flapjacks in the previous session. This gives the listener and it gives you a map. Now, I'm going to tell you about each of these steps. And any of you that tend to lose track or that tend to run off, right? You get lost in the weeds. First thing I did. Second thing I did. On number 3, here's what was important. Number 4, say them out loud. Just say them out loud. You're giving them a map. Oh, she's on her 4th step. Awesome. Hey, Susie, what was the most challenging part about that 4th step? We have all kinds of problems when we usually get to that one. You're going to get some of that. Let them ask. Then you tell them. You give them a little more detail. And it also shows that you have a big picture understanding. People pay more for systems than they do for tasks. I mentioned that in part 1. I'm going to mention it again. When you show them that you have a framework or a methodology, it makes you sound smarter. It makes you sound more experienced. It makes you sound more organized. It just makes you sound more expensive. And that's what we want, right? It gets you paid more. The other thing is it shows that you, again, you're reiterating here in the second part, because you already did that in the first part with the context, is you're elevating that discussion to say, look, this fits inside a formula. It's not just this one thing here. Often there could be breaks in many steps, or there could be breaks in the handoffs, or there could be breaks within each of the steps. So that's the feelings you want them to have, that you are more senior, that you are very organized, that you are more complete, that you are even more detailed. And this is what helps keep their attention, because they know where you are and they know how long you have to go, likely, right? They have an understanding of where the story is. They know why it's being told. Now they can see all the details of what you're actually saying and what you're about to tell them. All right, good. All right, well, now in the STAR technique, the second step is the task. Now, again, I don't want to split hairs, because depending on who's defining what the STAR technique is, but most people and their understanding or their interpretation of the STAR technique is, okay, tell them what you were tasked with. I was tasked with building a CRM system. Okay, that sounds fine. Versus, there were 7 steps to building this system. This is my methodology. This is my approach, right? It's all in the receipt of what you're saying. How you say what you say is just as important as what you say, but making sure that what you're telling them is complete, so that they can get a feeling that you're coming in with the formula is going to make them feel better. So just be careful there. And a lot of times, in the STAR technique, people are rushing through these two, the situation and the task, because they think They think all the gold is in the activities, when I would tell you the accent is in step 1 and step 2. That's where you win it. It's over by now. It's already over before I get done with the slide, because they already are thinking, yeah. Because once you tell them why you were doing something, they're going to think you were successful. Then they're going to look for, well, do they understand how to do it? If you've already told them this very quickly, you got them. Inside of 30 seconds, they know you understand what that project is going to look like, what the steps are going to look like. Whatever else you say is gravy from here on out, because you've already told them the result. You already told them what happened generally, or at least they assumed. But don't worry, we can save some bonus stuff for the end. All right, next thing is, all right, you told them the 5 steps. Now what? Now you're going to get in, and because they understand that you have the methodology, you just need to fill in a little to show and substantiate. So the first thing I did when I organized the closet is, okay, step 1 is the inventory. What that means is I want to inventory everything. What that entails is I take everything out. I fold all my short sleeve t-shirts. I fold all my long sleeve t-shirts. I hang all my buttons downs. I fold my pants, or I put them on a hanger. Or I got my suits, my sport coats, my this and that. And all that stuff is what I inventoried. That's what I'm talking about. That's the details. That's the actions. So what you're saying is I inventoried that, and I'm telling you what I inventoried. Right? Makes sense? I gathered the requirements. I had to determine what the issues were, who was involved, get the stakeholders, assemble the committee meetings, and so on. Right? Then you're going to cover the highlights. High points only, please. You don't need to take them down into the weeds, not unless they ask. And remember, this is about story pacing. If you think that explaining how the sausage is made is going to make it taste better to me, you're sorely mistaken. Follow me? I don't need to know how you grind the pork, how you encase it, and all that. Right? I basically make sure that they're all uniformly made, and every sausage link is 6 inches, and this and that, and it's this diameter, and it's whatever. Right? You give me the highlights. Boom, boom, boom. I measure it. I cut it. And chop it. You focus on you. Remember, here's where I sit in the context of this world. And so don't worry about, well, there was this team and I had to hand them this, and there were 7 consultants from BCG who had to gather. I don't need to know all that. Those are details that are weighing down your story, not to mention, worst of all, they're making you sound less important. The spotlight needs to be on you. They're interviewing you, not the 7 consultants from Boston Consulting Group. Got this? Cool? And it also, you're guiding the listener by showing them where you are in the story. Okay, so the second step is, after I inventoried everything, then I need to make sure that I grouped it all together, prioritized it, this and that. That entails this, and so on. Step 3, step 4, and so on. Okay, what this does is, again, you're continuing to drive home the organizational aspect that you have that's just ingrained in you, but it also is showing them now that you're giving them enough information so that they are feeling, okay, yeah, she knows what she's doing. Yeah, she knows what she's doing. As long as you don't say anything totally out of left field that's so counter to what they think, unless you're going to say, hey, you might be thinking, but I discovered this, and here's why, like super fast, they're just going to assume you know what you're doing. They're going to assume all the other details were all in order. It's true. It's true. Next thing, what are you trying to elicit? They know their stuff. They know how to solve problems. Wow, in all those steps, there must have been a whole bunch of problems. So they must know how to handle a lot of problems. There must have been a lot of different customer questions, different scenarios, different size customers. Not to mention, through the entire CAAR technique, you're gaining a reputation as a great communicator. Wow, if they answer their interview questions that way, can you imagine them giving a presentation to the management team? That's what's happening in their mind. That's what they're gauging when you're talking to them. And you're going to keep their attention that way. Now, in the STAR technique, this is where you talk about your actions. And while it's similar in my CAAR technique, The difference is when you're talking about actions in the STAR technique, what you tend to do is you tend to talk about them isolated or serially with no context to the bigger picture. And so with the CAAR technique, I want to reiterate, you're always going back to here's where I am on the map. And that's okay, step 1, step 2 of 7. Right? So by the time I got to the third step, all of your activities are inside some kind of formula. With the STAR technique, most people don't do that. Most people don't do that. They're very, very point solution oriented when they use the STAR technique. So I want you to make sure that what's happening here is whoever is listening to you will know exactly where you are at any moment in time. It's a big, big deal. When I talk about memory labels, they're not remembering what you said. They are sending themselves signals that say, wow, she's organized. She's a great communicator. They don't remember why they drew those conclusions. And if you want more on memory and how memory works and how quickly people forget stuff, where's my little beauty? That's all in the interview intervention book, which you can certainly grab. And then, yeah, that does get you paid less. And then the result, what you're doing here is you're going to reiterate. So we were losing 50% of our customers, which was about $62 million a year. All right, you're foreshadowing the result when you set up the context. But when you get to the result, now what you're going to say is, okay, so we got done with the project, and then after a year, we measured it. Not only did we get that $62 million back, but we also increased it to $80 million, okay, on the communication, on the communication of the result. You hit the result you foreshadowed. And additionally, what we noticed was our new sales went up as a result of, because we had more time, because we were able to solve their problems faster, it created more time for our CSRs or customer service reps or agents to, because the customers weren't upset, we solved their problems so quickly, they were so happy with us, even though that something broke, it gave us more time to sell them all the services they didn't have, and we noticed an uptick that was sourced from existing customers. Our revenue also went up 10%. That is a benefit extension. Andy, you're so awesome. Thank you so much for making my pulse go down and my job search easier, and I found my job faster and I got paid more, so my wife is happier. That's a benefit extension, right? It's all you that join my program, your spouses, your partners, your children, your grandchildren, they're all going to be happier because you're going to be happier and easier to live with. That's a benefit extension. You get the idea. But this is also a spot where they made an assumption that what you foreshadowed initially occurred. Now you get to surprise them at the end with even more benefits. That's what you want. What does Andy do to you all? But wait, there's more. There's another bonus I'm throwing in. Right? It's the same thing. I do that with you guys. Haha, right? You get this, right? So you're getting a chance at the end to crescendo. Not wonk wonk. All right. And then I want you to make sure, for those of you that go to the Andy School of Everything, that you are citing results in relation to the Great 8. What are the Great 8? There's a bajillion videos on my YouTube channel where you can check that out. There's probably a whole bunch of shorts on YouTube. There's Instagram videos, LinkedIn videos, TikTok videos, Twitter videos, X or whatever they're calling it these days. You get the idea. But you are focusing on impactful accomplishments and goals that employers have, such as revenue generation, increasing revenue, increasing market awareness, attracting more customers, making them happier, so customer service, as well as corporate positioning and corporate growth and risk management. You're also looking at employee happiness. You're looking at cost reduction. You're looking at process efficiency, those kinds of things. Those are Great 8. So you can find out more about that on my YouTube channel. But this is what you're doing when you cite the result. It shows impact. It shows you have subject matter expertise, but it shows that you are a needle mover. What did I call them? Be a truck, not a trailer, right? I move the needle. What feelings do you want them to get at this stage? Wow, that sounds great. Wow, that was important. Wow, you can make a great impact. I know why you did it. I know what you did. I know what happened. This is putting a beautiful bow on the end of your story. And it, again, gives you an opportunity to surprise them. And if you say to me, well, Andy, I didn't really exceed. In fact, I underperformed. Don't use that story. You need something where you can crescendo, not zonk out. In the general star, what I find is that most people, they just simply say, and here's what happened. You're missing so many opportunities to sell yourself. So really you want to crescendo, upsell yourself, exceed the benefits that you foreshadowed if possible, and that's that. Now back to me. So I hope you enjoyed that. I'm constantly trying to show you different ways to think about how you share yourself in an interview. And I get asked a lot, well, Andy, when I'm forced to use the STAR technique, as if that is even a good idea. And any company that forces you to answer questions a certain way, I think is ridiculous. However, that's okay. They can be ridiculous. I don't care about them. I care about you because you're here with me and I want you to have a better life and a better career if that's what you want. So I want you to understand how you can make analogies. And if they say to you, please use the STAR technique, then just say the situation is, and then inventory it, right? Cook up the first course meal or first course of your meal, just like I outlined in the context. And then if you want to say, well, the task was, I have this project and I did 7 steps or whatever, then just give them your framework. And here are the activities. They're not going to know the difference. And the result's going to sound like the result. So you'll be fine. So I hope you enjoyed that. Context, then approach 1, which is your outline or your framework. Remember, people pay more for playbooks. And then second part of the approach, the second A, approach 2, is going through and back through your inventory of steps. And you're telling them the actions at each step for illustrative purposes only. And then the 4th step is the result. All right. If you enjoyed that part of the show, make sure to click the like button. That's the little thumbs up thing on YouTube. I think it's a thumbs up thing. Boy, it's been a while since I've seen. Yep, a thumbs up thing. Make sure you click that. Share this. People need help. If all of you, how many of you are here? 148 still here with me for the 2-parter. If every one of you sent that to one person, that's another 148 people. That is not nothing. That is a big honking deal. So I hope you enjoyed that. All right. If you're watching this on the recording, I'll see you next week.